Wonderful. So I feel I've got to say this next title with an American Z. So The Business of Buzz, Building IP in the Age of Gen Z. Please welcome Natalie back to the stage to introduce our next fabulous panel. Give her a round of applause.
Hello again. I'm Natalie Jarvie, the editor of Like and Subscribe at Ankler Media. And today I have Amy Powell, president of Vice Studios, and Ziad and Nate, who asked that I call them work husbands. So normally I would give some sort of preamble, but we're breaking some news today, so I'm gonna actually kick it over to Amy to tell us what she's got cooking up over at Vice.
Thank you. Well, one of the shows that we're really excited to announce we are kicking off on our development slate is a show called Work Husbands, inspired by the real life story of Nate and Ziad, which I will let them tell you about. But really the idea is, what is a workplace comedy for today's generation? And if we think about the long-lasting legacy of shows like The Mary Tyler Moore Show, Cheers, The Office, there's always been one central dynamic in each of these shows. And in this show, we are not going to hide that central dynamic. We are going to share the love that two people share within the office and celebrate it. And that is what our show is about. It's called Work Husbands.
Yeah, I'm happy to kick us off. Yes, we're so excited to be here today to share about this development and to be partnering with Amy Powell, who has been a friend and mentor and client of ours in various capacities over the years, and somebody who I think has always been at the forefront of understanding where storytelling is and where it's going, and has always been a first mover in really embracing what the next generation of audience is so craving right now. And whether that be in television or whether that be in short form, we're so inspired by both Amy and Vice's tradition, right, and legacy and ongoing commitment to being at the forefront of where stories are and where they're going, and are so excited to be here today with the Ankler to share a bit about that, but to contextualize our work husbandry, as we're calling it. I guess we should start at the beginning. So my name is Ziad Ahmed. I am from Princeton, New Jersey, which I consider to be the greatest town on earth.
And we disagree on this point.
We disagree on this point, which is important insofar as we're both from Princeton, New Jersey. We both grew up in the same town and met each other when I was in seventh grade. I was in 7th grade. Nate was in 6th grade when I changed schools. And we're in different grades. I don't know if you can tell who's older, but it's me. But I'm not taller, that's for sure.
Just slightly more jaded.
Yeah, I'm a lot more jaded. But long story short, I was what you might call a try-hard in middle school and high school, and started a nonprofit when I was in 8th grade, built around social equality and social justice. And sort of through that, I found myself in a lot of rooms that I didn't know existed, with industry leaders, with decision makers, where I realized how often young people were being spoken about but not spoken to. And so when I was a junior in high school, I founded a company called Juve Consulting, having been inspired by my experiences with my nonprofit prior to that, where we got to work with clients of Fortune 500s, nonprofits, startups, helping them better understand and connect with the next generation of audience. And Nate was my business partner in a lot of that journey and experience, running my LA team. And we grew up in Princeton together and went to high school together. And we're on this crazy whirlwind journey together of building this company while navigating college and navigating situationships and navigating everything that comes with being a teenager and 20-something in today's America. And as we look back, I think, on our journeys, there's a joke that at our startup pre-acquisition, Nate's title was Chief Relationships Officer. But the joke is that's the only relationship Nate has ever been in, which is a fact. The part of the provocation of the idea of work husbands is, I think, we're living in a moment, right? So much of our job is cultural anthropology. Like, where is Gen Z? Where are we going? How did we get here? And we do a lot of thinking around this future of work concept, of the fact that for so many of us, work has become the central point in our lives, for better and for worse. And in an era where the personal and the professional have converged so deeply, is there a difference between a work husband and a husband? Is the provocation, right? Nate and I, for better and for worse, work very well together, and we FaceTime every night before we go to sleep. And it often is because of work, but veers into many things that are not work. And I think many people, when we share that story, have somebody that comes to mind for them, that made work worth it for them, that sort of blurred the lines of the professional and personal, and that was for better and for worse. And we're really excited to pull on that thread as to what it looks like to tell a story that really allows us to uncover the complex moment that Gen Z is navigating, the humor and the comedy and the juxtaposition that exists within that.
Yeah, I mean, Ziad sort of said it all, but to give a little bit more context to myself, as Ziad mentioned, I've been fortunate enough to lead this company with him for the last almost decade of our lives since we were children, and we have the pictures to prove it. But now, we have long been tasked with marketing products and working with a lot of the most influential companies and people in the world to help sell the things that they've made to young people. And I think it's been my ambition for a very long time to be on, part of the earlier part of that process in terms of how can we actually build and co-create some of the things that we're looking to sell. And I'm someone who is, a former theater kid who has long wanted to be in the world of entertainment. And I think Ziad and I are foremost consumers of content across, short form, long form. And so we're really excited to be joining Amy, who we've known for forever, as Ziad mentioned, to create something from the beginning that we can then ultimately go spread to a lot of young people everywhere.
And I feel like we should say that you started this from the beginning with an article that you wrote, Nate,
yeah.
right?
Yes.
Called "Did I Actually Marry My Work Husband?"
Yes.
Or accidentally?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, did I accidentally marry my work husband? So clearly you guys had an idea here, and a big idea that you were able to distill down into an article. I'd love to understand how an article becomes a TV show. So, Amy.
Yeah, Nate shared the article with me, and I said to him, what's so great about this idea of a workplace comedy that is for Gen Z is this idea of you are the same person when you go home as you are when you're in the office. So this workplace comedy that we've all grown up with is the same dynamic where most lead characters are putting on a mask at work, and they're one person hiding their love for whoever their romantic interest is, and they go home and they become an entirely different person. In this case, these two love each other at home, at work, and in all environments, and share every detail, small or big, of their lives with everybody in the office. They're not hiding their persona. And a lot of this is a result, as we've talked about, coming out of COVID, and this notion of work and life blending into one environment, and the stories, the romance, the friction, the drama, the tension makes for great television. And so we wanted two voices who are authentic to that process to actually create the story for us. And that's really important to the DNA of Vice. We're not looking to have gatekeepers and layer on hierarchical voices. We want the actual voices to tell the stories themselves. And so the anecdotes, the way they speak to each other, they're constant. They're always in touch with each other. If you can't find one, the other knows where the other one is.
One was maybe tracking the other one here, I heard.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so that dynamic...
I didn't put this into my GPS. I just followed his location.
Exactly. So that dynamic is really fun and fresh for a TV show.
Yeah, so obviously the relationship dynamics at play here are very Gen Z. But how else do you think about, maybe Nate or Ziad, how do you think about making a show that feels inherently Gen Z in 2026?
Well, I think something that we talk a lot about with our clients in a marketing capacity is authenticity is often this buzzword that comes up in a lot of the conversations that are probably happening right here at Cannes Lion, right? And I think that what we often say is authenticity is not as difficult as we make it out to be, and things feel authentic when they are authentic, and they feel forced when they are forced. And I think, as someone who is a self-proclaimed film and TV nerd, part of this process was born out of the fact that we consume a lot of content, and we're not always obsessed with some of the things that are coming out these days that are geared towards Gen Z in the ways that some of the stuff growing up, some of which Amy is responsible for, we were. And so I think my favorite show of all time is Girls, and I think it's so rare these days that people even take a chance on young voices in the ways that people like Judd and Jenny did with Lena. And so I think in terms of how do we make this show Gen Z? Well, we're 27 and 26 years old. We are Gen Z. We've made a career on sort of translating our generation, and I think that's the exact way to do it. And we know a ton of writers and talent that we want to bring into this process that will make sure that it resonates with this community because it's built by that community.
Yeah, and the panel, I know we're here to make an announcement of sorts, but was about building IP in the age of Gen Z. I think to us, oftentimes we're here at Cannes, right, about advertising and marketing, and I think sometimes in advertising and along the beaches, you'll hear a rhetoric of short form versus long form, right? Linear versus streaming versus podcasting, and I don't think that's how we think of it at all. I think the way that we think about it is so many of the leading movies and TV shows today started as short form series, started as podcasts, started as sketch comedy shows on YouTube or whatever it might be. And so what we're seeing, I think, increasingly is how all of these worlds are converging into one media environment, right? I don't think the consumer thinks of it as one versus the other. We just think of it as media and stories. And the best IP and the best stories live sort of porously across these borders that are artificial in their essence, because for a young consumer, all of these are just different icons on our phones that we could click, right? And so our understanding of what it looks like to tell a story is, I don't think it feels at all overly ambitious to think about how we could go from an article to a TV show, or to think about how digital plays into that and how clipping plays a role in that, because to us, it's all about this one story, which when we say that what we love about marketing, and we're marketers, and we've worked with many of the folks in entertainment to tell stories to our demographic around content and otherwise, what we love about the idea of Work Husbands is when I say it, it means something to people, right? Like, you all have an image, a connection point, and maybe a strong hot take, right, on if work wives and work husbands are a good thing, a bad thing, a real thing or not. And that makes for discourse, and ultimately so much of why I think we do the work that we do writ large is our theory of change is that stories have the capacity to change the world. And stories have the capacity to allow us to better see ourselves and allow us to better then reflect, therefore, the world we want to live in. And I am really excited about the notion that there isn't a lot of content at present that I think meaningfully depicts the way that I interact with Nate, but also the way that I interact with any of my peers, right? That meaningfully represents the complexity of sexual orientation, of workplace dynamics, of a generation that isn't dating or having sex as much as they used to, right? And all of these are true, real, lived things that I think that we need to be sitting with and grappling with, because I think that allows us to then better reckon with what world do we want to live in. And I don't think that that's happening enough right now, but I'm excited about this idea that in today's ecosystem, where there are people like Amy and companies like Vice that are taking chances on the stories that can do different and can be bold and be brave, what IP we can build that can live across porous borders that allow more of us to see ourselves represented in the stories that we're telling.
And I think it's so interesting because as a studio head, you typically go and look at comic books, or you look at older books, or you look at remaking a movie, and legacy studios are still telling stories that were written 20, 50, 100 years ago. And we don't want to do that. We want to tell the stories of today. And so rather than looking back in history to find an old article, an old movie to remake, or a comic book that came out of World War II, we're instead, which many Marvel comic books are really old and work on a big screen, but instead we said, we want to tell the stories of today. That's what Vice is known for. And we want to tell the stories that other people won't. So rather than looking back, we just look to today. And these two, are not only funny, but they're charming, and I think they're incredibly inspiring. I mean, who doesn't think this, right? And so I think to be able to inspire people to be able to show up at work as their true selves and maintain relationships that are honest and have integrity both inside and outside of the office is something that Gen Z can really relate to.
So I know, Ziad, you were talking about kind of the way that all of this media is kind of blending together, and that a lot of young audiences aren't distinguishing between a TV show and a short form clip on YouTube or whatever for the sake of this audience. Is this going to be a half-hour scripted comedy?
Yes.
Is that the plan?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm curious, Nate, you call yourself a lover of movies and TV shows and all of that. Why does someone who's, in their mid-20s, want to make a TV show right now? Why is that an appealing goal for you?
I mean, that's a great question. I think, there is, to me, a misconception that Gen Z is not going to the movies and not watching television. I actually think that's completely untrue. I think television is actually probably one of the things that unites us most right now, right? And I think that it doesn't always come from the most expected pieces of content. And I think, everyone who works in entertainment is probably exhausted by the amount that IP comes up these days, and about how a lot of the big studios are looking to rely on the IP that they have within, their bank. But it is something that came up in our discussions, is like the idea of heated rivalry and like the impact that had on culture is something I haven't seen in the last 5 to 10 years, or even right now. Shout out to the people who were just speaking about like Love Island, right? Which is obviously reality, but I think is one of the largest pieces of the cultural conversation happening right now. And so I don't think Gen Z necessarily wants to just only spend their time on these short form platforms and isn't watching these things anymore. Like I'm a case study in that. I consume a lot of television, so does Ziad.
And we disagree on it.
We disagree on content a lot. So it's going to be fascinating to build something together. But we're really excited about it.
And I think on top of that, I 100% echo Nate's notion. I think there's a fundamental misconception as it relates to the attention economy that Gen Z is only capable of paying attention for 7 seconds or 1.8 seconds or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Girl, we're certainly binge watching for hours and hours and hours, right? And I think anyone who's interacted with a Gen Zer knows that. And whether that's, someone watching the latest, off-campus, start to finish in one day, or whether that's a boy watching 15 hours of YouTube in one day, people are locking in and watching content. There is no question that long-form stories are still incredibly salient with audiences at scale. What has dramatically changed is not that we are consuming long-form stories, it's where we're consuming long-form stories. It's how we're consuming long-form stories. It's the monetization around those stories. But the idea that young people are not consuming, are not so excited about traditional media, to me is completely counterfactual. When we think about the fact that the zeitgeist is defined by Traders, Love Island, Off Campus, Heated Rivalry, you think the World Cup happening, the Knicks in 5, right? These are all cinematic moments on our big screen, not our little screens, and often that are uniting people and creating a lightning rod of connection in a time that we know is characterized as an era of loneliness, where people are hungry and desperate for community. And I'm so excited about the prospect of what does it look like to create IP that becomes a lightning rod for connection and for community, for people at scale, because I think we're seeing time and time again that that's what young people are hungry for and are absolutely consuming. And I think it might be shocking to people that I vote every episode of Love Island, but I watch it on TikTok. And I know,
He's
maybe
never watched an episode.
I've never
of Love
watched
Island.
an
You're the
episode.
one screwing up all the votes.
Okay. I'm a
can tell you all
Nicolandrian.
about
I am a
Zrice.
Nicolandrian for life. I am Zrice for life, and I've never watched. And that's not because I don't have Peacock. I have Peacock. I have the streaming platform, and I use it to watch other things. But my algorithm on social media allows me to keep fully up to date on the show, and I, in real time, vote, right? And so, and maybe I shouldn't be admitting that, but it's true that
I think the Bravo Peacock folks have left, so it's okay.
but
He's known for his candor.
But I'm known for my candor, and we're also known that we often disagree on content. But I think that speaks to how all of these pieces can and do live together and can do so in a really beautiful way.
I think the important thing is just to create stories that resonate.
Yeah.
And,
Totally.
And then viewers will show up. We talked about Heated Rivalry forever. And the idea that that story worked, not because of the casting. Nobody knew the casting. The writers were not huge screenwriters, but it was a set of books that had a huge fandom and community, and it spoke to an audience, and that's why people watched it, because it was really good storytelling.
And it was something, to your point, that no one had seen before.
Exactly.
Right? No one had seen a queer story be told like that before.
Yeah.
Right? And what episode 5 did for so many of us to allow ourselves to imagine a different world where people made active choices that affirmed one another rather than and what's so fascinating about both Off Campus and Heated Rivalry, which is really contradictory to a lot of the content that we've seen historically, is there really isn't one antagonist. Right? What I think speaks to where we also are in culture, and also what you're talking about around maybe it's okay that we're in a work husbandry, right? Maybe it's okay that you are sleeping with your hockey ex, right? Maybe it's okay. Maybe these things are okay, and hockey rival, right? But maybe this idea of so much of content, I think historically has been a little bit doomsday, and that's what's really sold. I think in a moment in culture where things sort of already feel like the present is kind of we just go outside, it kind of feels doomsday. I think people are looking for content that allows us to see instead what could be. Right? And I think a lot of the content right now that has been most salient with me has made me feel wow, I believe in love again. I believe in life again, right? And I think that that's really exciting.
So, Amy, I want to talk a little bit about how at Vice you're thinking about making stories that resonate. I think some people might be surprised to see you here talking about developing a new show. Vice has been through a lot in the last few years. You joined the company about a year ago as it was, working through coming out of bankruptcy and kind of reinventing itself. I'm curious, like, when you got under the hood at Vice Studios, what did you see there about, kind of what was like in the DNA of what makes a Vice project, and then how are you kind of iterating on that for this next era of the company?
Yeah. What made me excited about going to Vice, which Adam Stotsky and I talk about a lot, is that the brand is defining. When that logo comes up, you know that you're going to get something that's honest, that's real, that's authentic, and that is a story that other people won't tell. And so we have like really strong brand tenets that we stick to, and it allows us to create only content that ladders up to the brand values that we want to bring forth. And for us, working with people who can bring those stories forward is what's most important. So we're not just leaning into building a traditional or legacy studio that has reams of development, that has, writers list and directors list that take 3 to 5 years to get something made. We believe in speed to market, and we believe in telling stories that are culturally rich now and that will have enduring value. And so we want to create conversations that actually change the conversation and create cultural impact. And to do that, you have to move quickly, and you have to work with writers who can tell that story from a sense of true identity, and that's what we think this show really brings forth. No one has created a workplace comedy yet where you can openly show two people who will they, won't they is sort of a big part of the central dynamic, and will either of them ever fall in love with somebody outside of their work husband is like a really great hook. And to show that as an authentic, honest approach to storytelling is what Vice is really all about.
So tell me how Work Husband fits into the kind of slate that you're building. I know you've been here with Pablo Torre this week as well, so you've got something with him. Tell us more about some of the other projects that you're developing.
Yeah, well, the studio has Gangs of London, which has been shooting for in our season 4 right now in London. It's a big show with Sky. It was directed by Gareth Evans, who created it out of a video game. So video games are a great piece of source IP for us. We have a video game called Payday, which we just optioned this year, which is another great source of IP for us that tells relevant content for young viewers. Pablo Torre is an esteemed Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who we're creating a sports family drama with. We just optioned a great book called Flat Earth by a young journalist named Annika Jade Levy, which I had Nate actually read it for me before I optioned it to give me his opinion.
I read it in one day. It was
he
amazing.
did. He reported right back with his thoughts. But I think with
young people are still reading.
And young
too.
people are still reading. And I
when
think
Amy Powell asked them to.
and listening to webcasts like Pablo's webcast, which is called Pablo Torre Finds Out. And so the point of that is just to say we are looking in the nooks and crannies that other people aren't looking in. And I think to Ziad's point, obsession, backrooms, heated rivalry, all of this new content has illustrated that Gen Z still wants to watch great content, and looking outside of the traditional boxes of, I spent decades looking at books and graphic novels and old movies to remake, and at a certain point, everything's been picked over. And you have to look into new places. And so for us, that's what Vice is really all about.
And I just want to add, Vice actually made a little a little video about me and our company when I was 21.
Yeah.
And Vice had me be a part of a debate of Asian Americans on their channel years ago. And so for us, with that, and also in tandem with, we've had a relationship with Amy for, 4 years now, something like that, where we have been, so many of the conversations that we see playing out in Work Husbands are conversations that we've had with each other, right? Around what it's like to grow up today, around how complex work has become. And when we thought of, if we want to develop what this could look like Vice and Amy were such an obvious answer, insofar as they have continued to be at the forefront of finding those stories and taking risks and not shying away from the hard conversations. I think so much content and advertising while we're here and while we're at it plays it so safe, right? And it's therefore so boring. And I think that what have always been interested in as marketers, as creatives, as storytellers has been, what are the stories that haven't been told? Yeah. And how do we do things that nobody's done before? And for us, I think having partners that we know have such a strong record and track record in doing things that no one has done before and doing them well is exactly why, for us as work husbands, this is indeed a perfect marriage.
And can this literally change the work environment for younger people moving forward? Right? Can it be a safer place? Can they show up as their more authentic self? Can this actually have lasting impact? Is what's exciting to me.
So you mentioned you're moving fast. You're financing projects, right? You've got a new credit facility that's allowing you to get in there and finance. Big piece of this is then getting people to see it. What's your POV right now on the landscape in Hollywood of distributors that you could sell a project like this to? I mean, there's a lot of consolidation. How are you viewing that landscape right now?
I think it's really an opportunity. We have shows set up almost every buyer right now. And I think these two can speak to the marketing of a show better than I can today, truthfully. But the opportunity to find your audience and then speak to them on all of these different platforms in a distributed manner is what we think will actually allow, whether we're putting creators in the show, modeling characters after creators and people like Ziad and Nate themselves, and actually able to pull an audience into the show because there's built-in fandom and community already is a big part of the marketing of the show. And then the buyers, again, we're selling to everybody, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, I'm curious how you guys are thinking about that. I mean, I think one of the big takeaways of Obsession and Backrooms and Iron Lung is that, when you own your audience, they will come out and support you. And you have to do that early. You can't start that, 3 months before a movie comes out. That has to be baked in from the get-go. How are you guys thinking about starting to build that audience now? You're the creatives behind the project. Maybe you'll appear in it. I don't know. But how are you thinking about starting to kind of build that drumbeat?
We have
early?
discussed casting already, but we'll table that.
I mean, well, I think on one hand, we've sort of already been doing that for the last 10 years, and that we're very fortunate that we built a successful company that had a real name for itself within the world of Gen Z, marketing and beyond. And so I think there's a lot of folks who are already aware at some level of the work that we do and who we are as people. And the many, it's funny how many people who have been a part of this team over the last 10 years have gone on to do incredible things in business and politics, and our alumni network is pretty unbelievable. And I think we are very, very close friends with a lot of young talent as well, and that's part of our job. People work with us for our proximity to the most influential actors and artists and influencers and speakers and entrepreneurs within sort of the Gen Z community. And so I think having that community on our side is super beneficial. And then I think, like I said earlier, we're historically, we've worked with a lot of the streamers and distributors on marketing their projects for them. And so I've found a lot of success in that, and like to think unconventionally, right? It's not like we come from a marketing background where we worked at some of these larger companies and then we're taught sort of the box to think within. So we've always sort of thought hopefully a little bit unconventionally, and so relying on some of the tactics that we know have worked for some of our other clients to do this for us. And I think so much of success these days is about, again, the cultural conversation that's happening online. I think that's when you get people to watch something, is when they feel like they're not a part of something. And the idea that these press tours can really, really, really either make stars or rely on stars to get a ton of eyeballs.
Yeah. Look, if I was in a conversation 10 years ago, I think most people would have looked at me and said, is there really a business to be made in a Gen Z agency? I would have said the same thing. And somehow we got acquired 8 years later, and I'm still freaking doing it, right? And we're doing quite well, right? And I think we and I have made a career on making good bets. And I think Amy and Vice are doing the same. And I think to the point that we made, I think that's what gets us excited, right? I am somebody who I think thrives in, maybe the odds aren't in my favor all the time. I'm 5'4". Often, they're quite literally stacked against me, right? But I take that as an opportunity to reach and aim higher, not as an opportunity to back down. And I think that there is appetite insofar as every person that we've talked to about this project has been like, wait, I love that. And the fact that the two of us agree on the fact that it's a good idea is kind of testament enough to us to believe that there's legs here. And what we're excited to do is to explore with Amy, with the talent in our network, with the people that we know around there is already a rich discourse on this very topic. And so like audience already exists around like the number of think pieces there are on the future of work, on workplace dynamic, on is it kosher to have a work husband or not? Like that audience is there. Who's serving them? Right? And like I think that's the opportunity, and I don't think it's a linear path. And I don't think we're not coming up here today to say that we have all the answers. Like this is us saying like we're excited to explore that together and figure out where we net out, right? And figure out who we end up collaborating with along the way that can maybe really energize this to life.
So I'm curious, you guys have spent a number of years consulting with people in Hollywood about how to reach Gen Z and how to make something successful. What's it like to now be on the other side? You're now, Nate, you're sitting down, you got to write this thing. So what are you learning about Hollywood and how entertainment is made? By being on the creative end of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, it's super exciting because it's where I've always wanted to be. And so, when I sort of pivoted to focus more on some of these creative endeavors, I'm really excited that it's working out that way. And I think, like I said earlier, I think I take the learnings that I have from the world of business and the world of marketing, both in terms of like someone who's considered themselves, an anthropologist for so long and a cultural anthropologist, how can I no longer just take that into the world that builds content and media for brands, but the world that makes that for Hollywood. But I also think the learnings in that when we started this agency, we had no idea what we were doing, right? We were 16 years old, and we had an idea and we had conviction, and it worked out. And I think I feel similarly. Like I don't necessarily just want to play into convention because I think convention is not necessarily serving us right now, and I think there's a lot of panic around what Hollywood looks like. And so I think for me to just sort of fit into the tropes that have always worked is not necessarily the way I want to go about it, and I want to think about what's really exciting for me. And I think I would also be remiss to not bring up, like, we, in all the conversations we've had for years now, have a huge shared love for the show industry. And I think that Mickey and Conrad, who made that show, are also like a great example of people who had real lived experience in an industry, which was banking, and turned it into a story that had absolute no names in the beginning and now has become such a cultural sensation that people wait each week for as seasons come out. And I think that's because they were so within the system that they were able to tell the story in a way that no one else could. And I hope that's what we're able to do. And I hope similarly we can tell a story about highly ambitious and successful young people that comes with a little bit of sex, drugs, and rock and roll as well.
Industry meets heated rivalry. I don't know. Sounds
like
a recipe for
that
success.
Was in the deck at one point.
Heard it here first.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.